Alrighty. Hello, everyone. I'm Joker, and I'll be the main moderator for today's event. This evening, we have our guest, Avalonia, who has prepared a lecture on physics and natural philosophy. There will be moments throughout the lecture where he will be open to answering questions, so if you have any questions related to the content he's teaching, feel free to raise your hand. Now, I'll give him the floor to introduce himself. Welcome, Avalonia.
Hello. I'm Avalonia. I have been studying physics for, currently a grad student in physics. I'm completed uh, my main coursework in solid state physics, and uh, and I'm currently researching quantum computing. But the main focus that I've really the topic of this lecture is going to be about the philosophy of nature, because in addition to studying physics, I have independently studied uh, Hegel for essentially, I want to say about 5 or 6 years now. And for that time, what's interested me the most in this topic area has been um, has to do with the nature of really what the natural sciences are, uh, both in a philosophical and conceptual sense. And there are certain clues that provide a way of actually analyzing what the essence of what a natural philosophy or philosophy of nature really is. So to begin with, what is more commonplace in the research into natural sciences today is a more of a analytical method of natural science. So at the beginning of the 20th century, physics was said to be much in a state of crisis. The realization that the elegant system of classical mechanics approximated reality, and only in the case of low velocity bodies, essentially destroyed much of the faith that people had in the purely mechanical Newtonian view of nature that had promoted the philosophy of the rationalist picture, determinist picture of nature, which had dominated for much of the 19th century. Uh, the so these essentially new discoveries in 20th century physics and modern physics uh, essentially deepened and called for a much more drastic revision of this traditional viewpoint. Uh, it was it was really only after Einsteinian relativity that uh, the logical positivists began to give their own so-called analytic theory of uh, philosophy of science. Uh, so, in an effort to affirm Newton's original warning of metaphysics, uh, the main idea of the logical positivist approach to natural science and physics is that it essentially demands a strict division between theory and facts. So any proposition or meaningful statement is either a priori analytic or empirically synthetic. And if no statement fits either of those categories, then um, it's rejected as being just metaphysics, or um, which to them, metaphysics is synonymous with uh, something that is extra scientific, or outside of the sciences. Um, so uh, to give like a basic description, a priori analytic statements are uh, essentially tautological, in the sense that to deny them would be a self contradiction. So those kinds of statements are logically necessary and can't really be refuted from the standpoint of a formal logic, but they can't really explain anything other than itself. So it's purely self-referential and cannot really accommodate observations and facts, which are uh, essential to the development of any science, um, and scientific knowledge. Um, whereas the uh, synthetic empirical propositions are purely matters of fact and have to be attested by direct experience, whether and set up in a case of experiment or scientific observation. Uh, it produces certain statements which can be tested and hence either validated or invalidated. Um, but the difficulty with this is that with in synthetic empirical statements is that it's impossible to have to be fully conclusive with its verification. And this has been well known since David Hume, since it's impossible to guarantee that certain instances in reality will be experienced because they have so far been repeatedly in your experience, no matter how many times they have been. So uh, something like uh, the sun rises every 24 hours in the Mediterranean cannot be really conclusively verified because there's always some possibility that the sun may not rise tomorrow, as you might expect. Now, this uh, one of the main proponents of this type of uh, sorry, the person who noted this and instead tried to replace a verification with just falsification was Karl Popper. And it, with that replacement, it's possible to make that claim that a falsifiable claim about nature is meaningful only in the sense of it being non-metaphysical. But to abandon verifiability of uh, scientific propositions and just being only content with something being falsifiable uh, has exactly real consequences for the natural sciences. Since no testable hypothesis can really be shown to be true or false definitively, then it would have to mean that any natural science would have to renounce its claim to knowledge of any definitive truth. So, to that extent, any specific or particular science uh, can only know for sure what nature does not do, but never what really nature is in its concept. So uh, essentially, on that point, there has with the general notion of um, with the general notion of the dominance of positivism in the sciences, there has been a uh, rejection of uh, logic in the conceptual and necessary sense that before you can have uh, a foundation for a any subject matter in the natural sciences, you would have to have uh, a concept, a really an idea of what it is from the standpoint of pure thought. Um, so now the approach to resolving this is actually Hegel's method provides uh, essentially an answer to this. So now transitioning away from the history to uh, Hegel's philosophy and method specifically. So around in 1817, Hegel essentially discussed this about Newton, and I quote, uh, Newton gave physics an express warning to beware of metaphysics, it is true, but to his honor it be said, he did not by any means obey his own warning. The only mere physicists are the animals, they alone do not think, while man is a thinking being and a born metaphysician. The real kind of question is not whether we shall apply metaphysics, but whether our metaphysics are of the right kind. In other words, whether we are not, instead of the concrete logical idea, adopting one-sided forms of thought fixed by the understanding, and making these the basis of our theoretical as well as our practical work. So, according to Hegel, uh, the sensible instances of things in the world do not by themselves are not by themselves a coherent whole. Rather, it is the supersensible categories of thought can be which are logically necessary to each other in a total self-contained system. Uh, the in that sense, Hegel's logic therefore coincides with a uh, metaphysics in a dynamic sense or the concrete sense. Uh, to reject or ignore metaphysics would be to deprive a person of their intelligence, their faculty of thinking. Uh, so, and Hegel here also is criticizing the partial one-sided forms of thought that are fixed by the understanding. Uh, so, and by understanding, Hegel quite specifically means a mode of thinking which is uh, very distinctive. It makes mutually exclusive and categorical divisions. Uh, it regards the categories of thought as essentially static, fixed, and lifeless, and does not really have a true defense against the categories which it presupposes. And it is only a effectively knowing what reason is, which is self-identical to logic, that the one-sidedness and empty formality that that cognition or ordinary cognition imposes on the world, that a comprehensive uh, self-synthesis of the subject matter is possible. Which this is essentially what uh, dialectic means. Um, conceptual. It's conceptual thinking, or which actually is analytic and synthetic at the same time. Uh, so, from the standpoint of reason, you are beginning with the pure thought of of whatever the particular subject matter really is, because with thought, it's no longer interfered with by my own opinions, or uh, what I simply project onto it, but it actually penetrates the inward truth of the object itself. So pure thought is completely divested of everything um, contingent, such that it itself is universal, and is the identity of or has for it the identity of subject and object. So, in other words, to even be able to have an idea of an ontological, or the idea of what the object of cognition is, you already that already posits and presumes a method of understanding it that is inherent to the subject matter itself, um, which likewise, the method, uh, or you could say the epistemology for any subject matter, is uh, internal to its concept. So, uh, whether or not a certain method is actually valid is if it is able to generate, or logically synthesize the its own object of inquiry. So that is, in essentially, uh, in a nutshell, what uh, the approach is uh, for Hegelian philosophy, and as well as addressing the issue that is at stake uh, in understanding the philosophy of nature. Now, I I could go into more detail with that, or I could move on to discussing the actual uh, content of the philosophy of nature itself. And I should say that this uh, new project that I have been uh, working on is essentially, it tries to look at what the essential concept of the philosophy of nature, and what it is essentially. Uh, so it's
Yeah,
not
it's
just
not just
it's not just taking um, the existing material that Hegel already wrote and articulating it. It's actually going through and thinking through the concept of what uh, what that topic is, and giving an exposition of it.
yeah. So when we think of nature category, right, uh, what in a literal sense, right, and like that's important because obviously if we want to do science about that, we need to actually use that we're talking about. And so this is like fully rational description of what that could even mean. That's the point of Avalonia's philosophy of nature project.
Mhm. Yeah, so to begin with, um, uh, for the philosophy of nature, uh, each of the categories which are developed after uh, the logic in a system. So effectively, as the subject matter of uh, nature develops, it also goes through the different categorical determinations and synthesizes or universalizes to the higher order categories via the contradictions which take place uh, from the preceding steps. So, in that sense, there every subject matter um, also has three forms of the method. Um, as you can kind of think about it as being the being, essence, and concept of the object of study, where you can think about it first that being is the mode of existence or operational principle of that object of study, without reference to its substantial content, and the essence is the inner content of the object of study that is subsumed by and consistently reflected in um, how it exists. And the concept or final moment exhibits um, how the object of study is capable of being determined by itself once the consistency of its existence and its substantive content are determined. And for nature, these moments are um, mechanics. So uh, this is essentially the notion of nature just as being purely self-external, uh, where you have moments of space, time, and motion, as well as the specific dynamical systems which form um, as a consequence of uh, bodies which are spatial and spatiotemporal and exhibit motion as each in themselves having uh, both a inertia and impact and uh, elasticity between them. And then you uh, have, for this final moment, uh, the concept of gravitation, which for gravitation, it is universal or free motion that the bodies themselves uh, move essentially by virtue of the interplay between space and matter, or space and mass, and therefore uh, fall or gravitational acceleration is rather the natural path in which the object freely takes in space. Um, and as for the second moment, where characterizes the essence of the subject matter, uh, is physics in the proper sense of the word. Uh, Now, in contrast to the previous point of mechanics, uh, this is properly speaking where uh, you actually have or are talking about real or concrete phenomena in physics rather than just say um, the pure concepts of space-time, motion, uh, like it's not just in a general sense of what nature is, but the nature in its particularity, uh, which is physics. Now, for this first moment, you uh, within that you have the categories or moments of electrodynamics as essentially being the uh, primary or substantive content of nature, say from the standpoint of uh, bosons or light, and fermions or actual rigid particles and their interaction between them, which form the process of which forms a groundwork for the uh, thermodynamics or the thermal process between um, states of matter, which, um, by virtue of their uh, being organized by uh, their particles and the forces that dictate their interactions, uh, this takes place as the appearance of nature, as from the standpoint of thermodynamics, it takes place where there are still the underlying mechanical principles, but they are also subsumed by these prior relationships in electrodynamics, where, properly speaking, you have the actual uh, its mode of expression in, say, as phases of matter, uh, temperature, uh, transfers of heat, and the thermal process uh, that takes place as a whole. And it is actually the unity of both of these sides of the electrical and thermal process that forms the basis of chemistry, where it becomes actually possible, say, for um, specific elements uh, to actually exist because uh, there is not only uh, electrostatic attraction, which electrostatic attraction and repulsion, but also of certain uh, thresholds of energy that need to be met, um, which can either be provided spontaneously or not spontaneously. And this, in that sense, uh, conditions the types of elements and bonds which uh, can actually form and and as a whole form the chemical process. Uh, Now, and for the final point of nature, there is the question of organics, which is nature in its concept, where the reason this being that rather than see purely mechanical or chemical processes are either one-sidedly um, characterized by their external relationships in the case of mechanics, or the internal relationships or affinities that different chemical elements have for each other. That it's only with the organism or a living being that essentially provides a groundwork for nature's actual self-determination. And in this sense, you can think about the categories differentiated here as being, say, uh, the the geologic process of the Earth, as in essence being uh, not an organism proper, but a pre-organism or proto-organism that exhibits via the interaction of its atmosphere, hydrosphere, and lithosphere, uh, the formation of different minerals, and is constantly a living or self-sustaining metabolism in its own right. And it is from this standpoint that this becomes the condition for um, the the emergence of real life forms, uh, which in themselves exhibit a differentiation of uh, particular features, um, and of complexity, such as that between microbes, plants, and animals. And taken as a whole, uh, you have the subject matter of ecology at the very end of the system, where you're not just looking at um, the the environment or the background of the earth, or specific finite organisms, but the whole process of life itself, from ontogeny, phylogeny, and essentially how uh, nature becomes a self sustaining totality that also implicitly implies the development of mind uh, at the very end, uh, which is from that point is the transition onward to the philosophy of mind from that final standpoint. Um, so that's the so uh, that's the general overview of uh, the system. I was going to uh, go into detail and take. Um, uh, I don't know if you wanted to uh, take questions for this next part.
Yeah. I think here would be a good time to take maybe question about methodology, and then question about uh, questions about some of the categories, perhaps.
Sure. Yeah.
Sure. And remember, guys, like, Avalonia is a trained physicist. This is not like a debate bro event. If you guys have questions, that's completely fine. But just like try not to be like a bad faith like shitlord. Uh, anyway, yeah, I think we're ready for questions, Joker.
Alrighty, just remember to raise your hand if you are interested in asking any questions. work went ahead and posted some of the structure in the side chat. So if there's any of those topics that you're interested in talking to Avalonia about, any questions that you want answered, now is the time to raise your hand. If not, then we will probably move on to the next section that Avalonia has prepared.
Yeah. Are there any, good faith questions about like free?
You're cutting out,
Like,
Darkmaster.
oh, is it better now? I was just saying, like, is there any good faith questions about like methodology, that we may like someone may want to ask? Oh, nice.
Salafi.
Let's take a question from Sonis.
Come on up, Salafi.
Oh, hello?
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, I wanted to ask, oftentimes, like, logical positivists in science who, like, universalize the natural scientific method, uh, have this notion that, like, this atomistic notion that, like, the brain secretes, like, thoughts just as, like, the liver secretes, like, bile, right? So how would you respond to like these sort of like mechanistic atomists who would be like, it's all just like atoms and particles and molecules. It's nothing more than that, you know? Like all thoughts are also like just compositions of various chemicals in your brains and stuff like that.
I see. So, yeah, so I think that uh, as far as the concept of uh, you could say understanding what cognition is, and in particular what the uh, how exactly the different processes of uh, what characterizes a mind, specifically, um, sentience, feelings, thoughts, intuitions, etc. Um, uh, Not in themselves is something that can be fully grasped um, uh, from a purely natural scientific point of view, because it's in the one sense it's a different object or subject matter that is although it is grounded in and comes from uh, nature, because uh, you know uh, thinking beings or rational beings um, are also embodied, they're instantiated in nature. So but there's also quite a difference between, say, you know, uh, other animals have brains, but we don't really see instances of animals doing things that um, in the exact same way that human beings do, or natural beings. Sorry, or rational beings do. Um, Even though that animals, even though they have um, uh, brains, or a certain, um, you could say, uh, intellectual faculties. These are pretty much limited to instinct and survival. Um, so the the I would, so in that sense I would challenge the notion that um, thought is something which uh, is exactly specific to um, just any kind of brain. Uh, So it's not just like um, to characterize it in a purely neurophysiological way is to uh, misunderstand the point of what that is, and you know that's something that can't really be um, reduced to nature, even though you know uh, neuroscience and the actual study of uh, the brain as a actual uh, studying what the brain does as an organ, that is something that can indeed be uh, uh, studied within natural science. Um, but I yeah, I am against the kind of equivocation that the brain is just an organ that is on the same categorical level as the other uh,
Well,
organs in the
yeah,
body.
yeah. I mean, yeah, because like that would presuppose that I mean, we understand nature. That would presuppose that uh we account for thought from nature, but it's like the reverse. We account for nature. We account for nature from thought. So it doesn't make
Yeah, it's
sense
essentially
to
yeah,
really.
basically
Yeah,
true.
yeah, yeah. Basically, the problem with that is that like you essentially pigeonhole yourself into being a presuppositionalist. But anyway,
Yeah. Did you have another question you wanted to ask, or?
No, thank you. That pretty much succinctly answers my question.
Oh, okay, great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Alrighty, we also have Fox Husband. Hello?
Hello?
There we go.
Yeah, okay, cool. Are you aware of the implicit presence of anti-realism in the Whiteman axioms of quantum field theory and fuzzy logic and Feynman diagrams and associated things?
Sorry, could you repeat those two things real quick?
There's within the axioms of quantum field theory, the Whiteman axiom specifically, it's widely speculated that there's like an implicit assumption of anti-realism in some of them, and as it relates to Feynman diagrams, there's a close relationship between like that quantum logic and fuzzy logic or alternative logical systems. So are you familiar? Are you acquainted with that? I mean, this is a physics and philosophy thing, so I feel like that's fair game, right?
Uh, yeah. Let me see.
but I mean,
So,
axioms aren't
Just,
really philosophical.
just admit if you don't know what the Whiteman axioms are, so I don't have to waste my time.
Well, we're not like being like bad faith debate bros. Like axioms,
Are you
like
typically
axioms
clueless
aren't
about
really
your own field?
philosophical.
Are you typically clueless about your own field? Is that what I'm getting?
what?
Uh, what? Why are you being a schizo on here? Anyway,
We actually have a question from the
I don't know what
audience.
quantum field theory has to do with anti-realism.
yeah. It's like I don't know. People want to be like schizo debate bros.
So there was a question from the audience, and he says then, oh, okay, the mic's working now. Okay, go ahead and raise your hand so I can pull you up. There we go. Come on up.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello.
You began in the introduction by giving an example as to why this sort of Hegelian point of view is necessary, and you gave the example of if we have a model of physics in which the Earth rises every 24 hours, physics still can't completely guarantee that this is an entirely good model because the sun might not rise tomorrow, and I got the impression you're introducing this as because you think that Hegelian philosophy fixes this issue or something. But I just don't understand. Like even if we adopt this Hegelian point of view, we still have to accept there's a small possibility the sun won't rise tomorrow. So I just don't understand like how it fixes this problem.
No, that's a misunderstanding of why I brought that up. I brought up that example because it essentially brings up a concern, brings up a question for the natural sciences as a question that uh, can actually be answered necessarily uh, as knowledge. So specifically with so why specifically, like it for any concept in nature, you actually have to describe why that question is even relevant to the subject matter itself. So if you're bringing up points that say that kind of trivializes um, uh, science to the point where we're just concerned with contingent things about like uh, whether or not the sun will rise tomorrow in a certain position. Uh, I was bringing that up as an example of the kinds of stupid trivialities that uh, tend to be uh, brought up as problems in the philosophy of science.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, you're just pointing out that physics can't tell us everything about the universe, and what you're just filling in the gaps using like the metaphysical gaps using Hegel. Is that it?
Well, you can't just ask any question, right? That it already presupposes something which you already have some knowledge about to even pose such a question in the first place.
Yeah, if you're gonna do, if you're gonna do an inquiry,
You're cutting out again.
yeah, sorry, my mic. If you're gonna do an inquiry into, you have to actually talking about. You know what? Let me actually switch to my phone because I feel like that would be a lot better for this. My bad. 1 second. Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
I can hear
Yes. So what I was just saying is that the problem is that if you're gonna do an investigation into nature, which is of course what the natural sciences do, right, or at least attempt to, you have to actually know what it is that you're talking about. That is to say, you have to actually have a proper account in reason for what nature even is. And so if you don't know what nature is, right, well, you could be, asking a question in a completely different category, but then think that it's a question in nature. In proper philosophy, we don't just treat nature as being. Nature is something very specific. And I mean, this is like part of the development of where philosophy is led. Philosophy in the proper sense, not like formal logic garbage, but like actual like conceptual logic, which is consistent from like Plato and Aristotle, up until like the modernists.
From the point of view of a conventional physicist, I would, for me, reality or nature, as you call it, is just whatever we measure, whatever appears when we make a measurement of something. Is there like an issue with taking this view? Is it I don't know. I don't understand really the point of going further.
Well, so it sounds more like you're talking about being as far as philosophy is concerned. For philosophy, when we talk about, when we talk about nature, we're talking about self-externality. We're not talking about just anything that is. And that's important. Like that distinction is important. It doesn't matter what we call this, but that like rational, like structural distinction is important, because if you don't have that, then you start like asking like questions and stuff in like the wrong places, and you're just confused on your reasoning.
Well, yeah, and I should also address that logically speaking, there is for Hegel the identity of thought and being. So of being is essentially you could say that something which exists or is out there, but so it constitutes something which is a measure for something insofar as it unites quality and quantity. But it simply isn't sufficient uh, to have, say, something be measurable. Like, of course, uh, there are real instances of say, like, there are real experiments you can conduct with, like, gravity. Um, just like the classic sort of experiment of Galileo, um, where I mean, obviously, of course, in conducting any sort of um, experiment, there are certain uh, regularities or a specific equation of motion which um, appears or defines that instance. But as instances, there is still the concept which actually underlies um, uh, what gravity is, say, that actually is essential and descriptive, that actually is able to um, identify those instances. Like it simply isn't enough for any natural science to be able to just inquire into how things are just as they appear, but to actually uh, understand the the mechanism behind it, uh, how exactly it relates to um, other forces, and you know, uh, it's not, of course, to dismiss uh, sciences which are extremely experimentally driven. That, of course, if you want to be able to um, do anything with a specific uh, a specific field of study in the natural sciences, um, obviously there's going to be uh, ways in which it applies, uh, ways in which it applies to the world in like in specific technologies uh, or at least how it shows up in the world in a specific way. Um, but the natural sciences are it does go deeper than that. Uh, like if you just want to be if you just want to um, do a specific experimental research, there is the specific measurements is, or just being focused on measurement or observations isn't enough. Like you have to know what it is you're measuring, what you're looking for,
Yeah.
how it shows up in the world.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, I think also, like to call to mind, we can like question. I think we have good reason to question the identity of what appears with what is measurable, right? Like in measurement, when you're measuring something, part of what appears melts into the background and like becomes the activity of measurement, right? So there has to be part of what appears that constitutes the activity of measuring and its context, rather than just like the thing being measured. You could say like in measuring, there must be something that you leave out of being made explicit for there to be any measurement, but it still appears.
Yeah.
Okay, I won't pretend to understand fully the answer, but thank you for answering anyway.
Yeah. This is just something generally in Hegel that the content and the method, so that is to say the thing you're investigating, and then the way you investigate that thing, there has to be a unity if you actually want to understand the thing that you're investigating. So what that means is like each different area you investigate is going to have its own way of investigation based on what it is itself.
Right.
And
You
then so
can't
you know
just, yeah, sorry, you can't just which is kind of what I was saying at the beginning. You can't just assume a certain epistemology or certain method that applies like universally. It's imminent to the uh, subject matter.
Yeah, and then so for Hegel, you're almost being empirical about reason in a sense about okay, well, where do these different areas of investigation lead by what they are themselves, and so like that's how you actually move forward in the investigation that you want to do.
Right. Well, especially because like when we're talking about concepts, to an extent we're talking about like thought operations, right? Like the memory of having thought something. So in a way, you can be very empirical in that sense, or you can sort of like recall these sort of like habits of thinking or operations in thinking retrospectively, and then sort of yeah, and then if that's your notion of the concept, then it's still like derived from experience, even if it's just like say the memory of a feeling of straining your mind in a certain way. Um, but yeah, that's one of the things I really like about Hegel.
Can you give any examples of explicit physical theories that have been like furthered by Hegelian thinking, or explicitly by Hegelian thinking?
So specifically, that's kind of the wrong question to ask, because this would actually concern a philosophy of nature more so than just like developing a specific theory which accounts for the uh, subject matter, and I can tell you why specifically. I This is why that is the case, because like suppose if you have a specific theory, um, say as a collection of scientific categories with material objects or relations uh, as which they are describing in the sensible world, then the issue uh, with uh, a specific method for philosophy can no longer be ignored. Like the abstraction and the synthesis must be confirmed not only in theory but also in reality, where reality and theory respectively refer to thought and their sensible instances. So claiming that they're you know the theory is not only a something which it appears as a product of history. So, uh, there is the notion that there is been the previous notion that the idea that science advances nothing new apart from uh, certain irrelevant details. That by then it would be at least be a basic outline or a at this point there would have to have been like a uh, all of the scientific categories available to be assembled in a dialectical system. But how can nature be totally known if its uh, knowledge from that standpoint is only relative, or rather dependent on hypotheses and conjectures, which um, are only so far so good. So there there is the notion of Hegel's metaphor of the owl of Minerva spreads its wings only with the falling of dusk. Um, and specifically, what Hegel means by this, not even just with the philosophy of history, but that uh, what something is, the world or a shape of life, um, that the object of cognition, that it's only when it's uh, gray, grown old, or completed its process of development or reached its end, that is it at all possible to um, develop a theory about it. That really, you could say that this is why it's even possible to construct a system of of any particular science um, from from the standpoint of what we know about it, uh, so far, uh, right? So there is a sense in which we ourselves are already participating in the process or unfolding of how that subject matter even develops in the world. So the the we can't really like jump forward or jump ahead and provide like um, a uh, ready-made unified theory, not even just of physics, but or really any particular uh, science that that it itself is takes place within its own time, and uh, and also as specific to the the logical problems which are presented, and which are in which case the theory actually addresses or solves. So uh, you could say that it provides a meta-analysis or metacognition of the topic, but uh, which is absolute, which is provides a lot of insight into understanding how, just simply understanding how the object of inquiry develops itself. And having that in mind, I think would indeed lead to um, being able to look at the current state of uh, uh, theoretical physics with a with a fresh a mindset, with a fresh perspective.
Hello.
Hello?
All right. Well, I'll leave the stage so someone else can ask a question, I guess. Thanks for the discussion.
Alrighty. We have flying space.
Hi. I'm just getting a book, but I was going to ask about Okay, I was going to ask about like causation. Like, what do you think causation is? So I'm currently studying metaphysics at a very basic level. I've read a couple of books, and it seems to be that people have the perspective either that sort of David Hume's view that it just basically doesn't exist, and we're just describing like terms to causation, or that like it's some sort of change of states or something. Right? That's like Aristotle. And there's like material cause that can, form more efficient and final. Do you think there's actually causation actually exists, or do you think it's just something we like an observer puts onto events?
Right. So this is actually something that Hegel does address in the Science of Logic, which, this is something that specifically he the category of cause and effect is specifically appears with the notion of there being in the first sense the self-development of reason, but also of between substance and accidents, or what is accidental to the substance. So, in this sense, Hegel's idea of cause or causality is derived from his concept of substance, because the cause belongs to um, the thought of a thing rather than its pure existence or being. The cause is the overarching, all-embracing rationality which is the power over everything that is accidental to it and is therefore an effect. So in that sense, that notion of cause is Hegel's how Hegel addresses the puzzle of causality that David Hume had tried to correct, or tried to answer. And Hume had argued that cause is not justified by experience and reason, because we never experience any necessary connection between cause and effect. Whereas Hegel's concept of cause indicates that Hume is partially right, that cause is not itself in the world of experience, rather that cause expresses itself in its
Would
there-ness.
you say it's phenomenological or whatever? Sorry, no, that's
Uh,
not. Yeah, that's okay, isn't it?
yeah. In that sense, I would say it's more phenomenological. This is basically how he answers like why we cannot experience cause directly with our senses, and also like Hegel's also critical of Kant here as well, that that we can somehow rescue the idea of causality from skepticism by limiting the idea of cause only to
it's like lower
our own
metaphysics. Yeah,
cognition.
it's like
Yeah,
psychology, right? Basically,
yeah,
that's the
yeah.
right
Like
term, right?
basically making it something transcendental, Kant was suggesting that the cause is essentially it belongs to a filter. It's a filter of cognition that
Is that a priori?
we experience. Yeah, but for Hegel, cause is in the world itself, but it's the thought or reason that is in the world, because the world is itself an expression of rationality or reason.
Yeah, the fact that you have events that are connected, right, is itself a rational expression. And so, ultimately cause for Hegel would be logical and rational. It wouldn't be this this thing that's like merely phenomenological, or like it wouldn't be this thing that like a Humean could be skeptic about just because of the fact that we think causally. It's not like we don't think causally, right? And like the fact that we have that reason tells us something about the world, because that's like how we're thinking about this in the first place.
Well, I guess I would just say is what do you think like reason is? Like, what do you think reason's motivated by? Because like when I think Hume thinks that reason is just basically a slave to passions in many ways. Like, do you think reason is able to reach these truths?
Well, reason in the philosophical sense, and this would include Hegel as well, reason is relationship. It's like the way things are related, as like parts within wholes and wholes within parts.
Well, yeah, the science of logic is essentially Hegel's complete answer, an argument for what reason is, and this is what he tries to do, to have an answer to this question, which is does not rest on any presupposition, which is essentially to say that um, the initial premise that you have uh, logically uh, it deduces or unfolds and returns to the beginning as a complete system. So in that sense, which is more of the notion of uh, virtuous circularity, you could say, rather than the vicious kind.
Yeah. A virtuous circularity would be a circularity that has explanatory power, whereas vicious circularity would be against explanation. It'd be like an anti-explanation, basically.
It's just
Well,
like
Uh,
self-reference.
you said that it
yeah.
doesn't use any presuppositions. I guarantee you're going to have a Christian presupposition that's coming very soon. Objects are real was in the chat about 5 minutes ago.
Well, I mean, it's not just like presuppositions. It's not just presuppositions of a theistic kind. It's also secular presuppositions as well. In the sense that, you know, uh, if you don't assume philosophical content, right, that also means you don't assume stuff like subjectivity. You don't assume stuff like, the cogito, right? Um, so, what's interesting about Hegel and Hegel's place in philosophy, um, is that even more than Kant, Hegel Hegel really became the most radical anti-presuppositional philosopher, in the sense that there was no like content assumed of the philosophical kind.
Okay.
So it's pretty interesting.
If you get one of them, it's probably a good discussion to have because they specialize in.
Oh, sorry, you cut out for me.
If you get one in the chat, it's probably a good discussion to have. Cool. I think he's.
Yeah, your microphone is cutting out pretty
I'm back.
heavily.
I was just saying, if you get one in the chat, it'd be a good discussion because they like arguing about it. Anyway, yeah, that's about it. Yeah, I'll see first if is anybody typing in the side chat if they want to speak or not. That's what I'd be waiting for.
Do we have any more questions?
Because I can keep speaking if there's nobody who wants to go up. You see.
It's up to Avalonia.
It doesn't look like it.
Well,
All right.
yeah,
Well, what
I
is your
could
view on
go.
like nominalism, right? Because I've realized, like I was thinking about it. Isn't it from what I see?
It's just more precept stuff.
Sorry, my microphone's thingy. Hello.
Yeah. I was just saying it's more precept stuff. But anyway, go ahead, Avalonia. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, you were asking. Your question was about nominalism, and
Yeah. Secularity. It's just that I think I've realized if the trait of the object, right, is sorry, I'll use the correct language. If the if there's only particulars and not properties, right? So I'm trying. I've got a book. I'm trying to read it. I don't know if this is nominalism. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, it's nominalism. I think that the particulars and the properties are just names to describe resemblances, right? But I think the issue I've got with that is if if you just are describing a property in relation to another property, right? Is that it would just be like the reason this property is because it looks like this property, right? The resemblance is basically becomes, from what I see, I could be wrong. The resemblance just becomes another word for a property because there's going to be something that resembles it. The underlying substance is the resemblance, which is the property. You're just basically substituting the word red, for the redness or something. You're basically substituting that for resemblance, which is still the same thing. It's just the redness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so essentially, Hegel's response to nominalism is that universals do in fact exist. Like the universal, at least how he deduces the concept of the universal, is basically to kind of give a quick rundown at towards the third part of the logic is that he basically is forming a development of the concept of reason where the universal is really the whole concept uh, uh, itself, where where previously the notion was that the substance that determines the accident, which returns to itself as part of substance, is the one cause that systematizes its effects. So this activity between the one cause and the systematized effect is this relationship between the universal and the particular, that that in general a universal is a concept that is an embracing identifier over some complete and systematized content that that is produced by its own activity. That like for instance, the concept of a fruit, for instance, that has the universal when it is defined as the one concept that basically presents, describes, and identifies the different instances of particularities of fruit that exist in the world throughout time. That it's not the same as the pieces of fruit. Rather, it's the unified concept of those, or rather, it's a category as a completed whole. So in that sense, he does, he rejects the notion that um, the that universals are something that can be replaced by uh, particularity, because the particular is itself a universal or universality over individual instances, and also that the universal is something that is also something that has to be transcendental, because the the universal has to show up in the actual instances themselves to really be um, at its core the that which identifies, um, which that's that's kind of the basic uh, uh, critique of uh, nominalism, I would say.
What would you sort of say to the idea that how do you like define ambiguous? Like do you think some universals can be ambiguous in like their definition? Like how do like they work?
Well, because the universal is the identity of the concept, it's something that already has to be something which is a defining power over something. So it's not something that can have like um, intrinsic ambiguity at that level, or at the level of the concept. Rather, uh, to even be able to um, like a concept that doesn't uh, have any effects to systematize, or both in something which already exists, or could possibly exist. Um, if it's not something that can actually um, recollectively have some expression or being in the world, then that's then you don't really have uh, 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 you don't really have a concept, because the concept must have content to identify and systemize.
Okay, that's all I wanted to really say. before I go, has anybody got points to that they want me to like address? Like, if you've got point, put it in the comment section or whatever. I'll give you everybody 20 seconds.
Yeah,
If
the
not, I'll move to
moderators
the
on
next
the
person.
stage were intended to do that task.
I don't think anybody does, so
We
I'll
have
give it to
somebody else.
Magnum. Yeah. All right. See you.
Thank you so much.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, hello.
All right, nice. So I want to hit you with a classic question about, physics that seems to appear so much, when prominent physicist figures are asked questions just to the public. Is the universe expanding? And if it is, then how can we understand this expansion? If it is not, then what does that imply about the nature of this universe?
Mm-hmm. Right. So to kind of give a preface to this, like even though there are things that I do know about astrophysics, that's not specifically my area of expertise, but I can um, give like a general sort of um, answer that uh, empirically speaking, that uh, yes, we do have uh, th there is indeed solid evidence that the universe is of course that there is expansion taking place, but there isn't um, as far as I know a a uh, fully coherent theoretical account of what spatial expansion um, uh, like an actual like there are different models of uh, that describe the universe uh, the universe's expansion. Um, like there are some uh, like there's the FLRW model that it tries to analyze it from the standpoint of the from general relativity, and it's the increasing that the expansion is increasing alongside the universe's space-time metric tensor, uh, and uh, but there are also other uh, explanations in the way of inflation uh, inflation theory, like uh, whether it be like uh, cyclic models or um, uh, big bounce, or um, also ones that also look at variable speed of light. Um, but like this is uh, not really something I can give like uh, a definitive answer on, like what uh, cosmological theory which describes expansion as fully accounting for, because well, I'm not an astrophysicist, and also there is a lot of densely theoretical work uh, involved in that area of research that I do not really have knowledge of.
Okay, I understand. I guess I had this assumption that physics was more predominantly about the astronomical, dimension. But so that I can, because I really want to ask you a lot of questions, but so that I can skew my questions more to your expertise, what would the enterprise of your expertise cover in terms of its content?
Well, primarily in terms of like general physics, the um, like it's pretty much fair to say that most of the field in which that I've studied um, has been in uh, not only like you could say solid state physics, but also generally uh, you could say like in classical physics, you could probably say like I have general knowledge of like classical uh, acoustics, optics, thermodynamics, electromagnetism, um, and also uh, some things in more the more modern understanding of particle physics and uh, nuclear physics. But
All right, I see. What about? Can I ask you a very general question about, what is the feud happening with the quantum mechanics type and the string theory type? I understand there is some sort of disagreement on the nature of how things work. How is that?
uh, yeah, so you're asking specifically about string theory and quantum gravity?
Yeah, well, from what it seems to me, it seems like there are major disagreements about how things work between the different studies. The quantum mechanicians might say one thing, but the string theorists might say another thing. What is there a way to pinpoint exactly, the points in contention, and why are they contentious in the first place?
Okay, so the question that you're asking specifically why there is contention over different theories of quantum gravity, because that's specifically what string theory is trying to answer in a certain sense of bridging um, a, uh, a quantum mechanical description of gravity that is also coherent with the descriptions of uh, the other three uh, forces in uh, quantum field theory. Uh, but so uh, specifically, I mean, there's some that there's some that I know that as related to uh, what is exactly at stake in the theories of uh, quantum gravity. Uh, that for uh, string theory specifically, as far as I know, its its research paradigm uh, stretches back, can go all the way back to the 1930s, where the there was originally a description of general relativity that in some ways looks like a a theory of a massless spin 2 field on a flat Minkowski spacetime, that there that there were originally this theoretical notion led to attempts to try to quantize this spin 2 theory from general relativity. But the issue originally is that the theory isn't renormalizable. So, and this is a problem if you have calculations in your theory that you have like infinities that you have no way of eliminating. So, in one sense, there is an issue, at least from the origin of string theory, is that uh, the ontology is kind of modified, where from point particles to extended dimensions of strings, that it was thought that to be able to have a quantum theory of strings, that you have that these strings exist in a higher number of dimensions, which is also another thing which is quite contentious, of positing extra dimensions which are not and cannot really be observed. Um, so the issue with that at present, at least in my opinion and assessment with string theory, is that there, even though there exists ways in which there are different kinds of string theories that are mathematically related to each other. This kind of path of research has become um, more and more abstractly mathematical and divorced from um, testability, and also there have been really there has been no successful formulation of a uh, string theory, or of quantum gravity for that matter, and it is still largely open in the way of conjecture, uh, which doesn't mean that it's not a real issue. Of course, I think that understanding how um, understanding what gravity is in concept, and how it uh, specifically relates to um, quantum mechanics is a real issue, because uh, there has been the issue of trying to how to put it, trying to define, um, in the one sense, quantizing a of quantizing fields of on a space-time background, when gravity is itself described by the variations and geometry of that very uh, space-time itself. So that's kind
What
of
do you
in
mean
one of
by quantizing? What is that?
quantization. Basically, quantization means that, in the one sense, if you have a theory that describes a process in classical mechanics, that it takes some data which is classical or described by Lagrangian or action functional, that it returns a corresponding theory of quantum mechanics, this is basically to say, how do you turn a classical theory into a quantum theory? That's what quantization essentially means in very simplified terms.
Okay. All right. Hey, Avalonia, this was very interesting, but really have to educate myself more on the greater, physicist sphere to understand what you said. I'll leave the floor to someone else who wants to ask great questions.
Alrighty. Avalonia, do you want to answer more questions or move on with your lecture?
I think that depends on if there are still still any remaining questions. Like I don't want to since it's kind of a first come first serve thing with questions. If there are still questions, I can still answer. But I can also move on as well if that's not the case.
We have 2 more people who want to ask questions, so I'll just bring them up. Marco Rubio first.
Hello? Hi. Oh God. Yeah, hello. I'm here. I had a question. What are the quantum effects as the smaller TSMC makes chips? Like, is like quantum tunneling more prominent at the scales that these TSMC fabs make? Like, is there tunneling going on and quantum entanglement when they're engineering these things? Thanks.
Sorry, you're I only caught part of that. You were asking a question about I heard quantum tunneling, but what specifically in quantum tunneling did you want to?
Well, yeah, I want to understand the effects of the quantum mechanics behind the chip sizes that Taiwan is mastering by engineering chips at the 2 nanometer scale using the Netherlands ASML extreme UV machines. Um,
Oh,
yeah,
I see, I see.
yeah. So, what are
Okay,
the quantum effects like?
yeah. So, first thing I should say that there are for the chip manufacturers that are trying to get around this issue of quantum tunneling. There has been some progress, but there's been quite some difficulty with it. Like there, uh, there, there is a concerning physical dimension surrounding quantum tunneling, whether or not it occurs in its gate length, and that's kind of been sitting around um, some amount of nanometers. I think like maybe like 16 or 18 nanometers, and uh, the so that one part of the critical dimension is very difficult to shrink beyond. That that the way to kind of way that they're working around this is that they can have larger transistors in places for power gating. So you can get the benefits of having like a bunch of um, smaller transistors uh, with that. But with quantum tunneling, there's a very thin layer uh, between like the insulator between the transistor channel and the gate contact. And usually the insulator is something like silicon dioxide, um, because you can very easily get it to grow on a wafer because it's basically just like rust from silicon. But it's even though it is an insulator, it's not really that good in um uh with like quantum effects. So the layer has to be like very, very thin to allow uh allowing it to be felt in that you know, like when you apply a voltage at the gate. So uh this this increase with quantum tunneling through the insulator is it gets thinner. But at the same time, there is a leakage path from the tunneling from electron in the source to a drain. So the thinner the channel there is, the more tunneling uh, uh, leakage there actually is. So the kind of practical solution to this has been kind of to moving to having a barrier that's having a finer structure and um and less to do with say actually shrinking the size of the chips. Um, because past that point you actually get to actually having a uh, getting less into uh, quantum effects in classical transistors and actually having something like a quantum uh,
Like a
Uh,
quantum chip.
could ASML make first contact with beings from a parallel universe?
Uh,
Or is that okay? That's off topic. Sorry, I retract. All right, I have nothing else. Thank you, Avalonia.
see ya. All right. I think we
Do we
have
have
one
any
more
more
question.
questions?
I think we had one more question, if I remember right.
all right.
From Magnum? He said his can wait, so Avalonia can continue with his lecture.
Yeah. Okay. So since we've already kind of established the outline for the philosophy of nature, um, I can kind of uh, describe some of the some of the categorical determinations which take place. Um, okay. So going back to the earlier discussion where I had initially talked about the development of the system into three parts, where a system of nature into mechanics, physics, and organics. Specifically with mechanics is itself a syllogism of three parts, that it's externality, dynamics, and gravitation, where with externality you specifically have the simplest sort of categories of space, time, and motion. And for Hegel specifically, you have the self-externality of nature being space, and there is nothing external to space because space is its own externality. And how space ends up defining its dimensions is that, abstractly, if you have just the regular or initial notion of space, then what is external to this space is actually uh, the space is negated with the point, or defining the point, because the distinction between the point and its dimensions are each in themselves external. So defining a point in space is by reference to another point that is external to that point, which, what's external to that is a line connecting them, and the line is external to another line that defines a surface, and the surface is external to another surface as which is a volume, where its space becomes bounded within itself and enclosed by each of its dimensional terminations that make it up. But with this idea of a spatial recursion, that you each have, in each going through these dimensions from points to lines to surface to volume, and repeating that, you actually have the process of time as a recursion of space, that space is continuously becoming or is continuously externalizing itself, as that space becomes external to itself as time, and time becomes external to itself as space. And recollectively speaking, this variation in identifying what this movement is between space and time is actually motion. And for Hegel specifically on this matter, that with motion there being a body that actually moves in space, that in describing the prior development of space being in itself the contradiction and different juxtaposition of differences and of negativity itself, it transitions to time, and time is also similar for its opposed moments that are held together as a unity, must refer back to space. That specifically what is a concrete moment of space and time is a place or a position. And with a place, you have a posited identity of space and time, set up by their mutual exclusiveness. So with a place or position, it is spatial and therefore indifferent, but it is also a spatial now, as in now is in time or the present. So it is with the place position, there is a condition of immediate indifference to itself, being external to itself, and so constitutes another place. That this regeneration of space and time and space, it constitutes motion, but to an equal extent, this is also how this contradiction collapses with the dynamics of bodies, because the immediately identical and existent unity of place and motion is matter, or specifically the body which is moved, or that which is in motion. And with this, you have transitioned from externality into dynamics, or the dynamics of bodies, which specifically, that once you have a notion of dynamics, then you have uh, a sense in which the motion of a body also has a repetency and a frequency, or essentially meaning that it is determined in space and time, or is restricted. But the movement of this body itself is found in the motion of another body, as in motion is something which is, in the one sense, persistent, or remains in motion, as its speed, or in a more determinate sense, as in speed in a certain direction being its velocity, whereas this resistance to motion is specifically its mass. So to have this combination of persistence creates requires and or persistence creates the conditions for resistance and vice versa. So without persistence, you cannot have um, a body which actually moves at all. Everything would just be inert or just, well, not even just inert, but just like motionless. Whereas resistance must have something to be resistant to, so it presupposes the category of motion. So to even have this, you have a persistence of motion into greater magnitudes of displacement, because to remain moving is also to traverse or be say be displaced or go from one place to another. Where also at the same time there is a resistant motion, which is in turn has a momentum to it, or that the resistance becomes a inherent to the body, not only as mass but also as velocity as well. So you specifically have something whose motion or resistance to motion is also sustained, like um, for instance, being able to more easily um, stop or apply force to a body that is much smaller, less massive than one that is heavier or requires a greater quantity of force to actually uh, to actually move it to rest. But with this, you also in themselves have derived this new category of uh, of impact, that the bodies aren't just uh, simply moving without reference to each other, or simply um, exist not only as velocities or masses, but also um, impart their motion to each other, and is also responsible for um, uh, accumulating, say, the where now have the category of energy as a capacity or ability to do uh, work, where you have a rate of momentum. That momentum itself constitutes a rate at which the persistence and resistance of motion, or velocity and mass, are combined. But this in itself is differentiated into potential and kinetic, because you can have a certain quantity of motion be determined by its displacement, like specifically, say, with something which is attached to a spring, uh, moving the object away from, or displacing the object with the spring is essentially storing potential energy that once released, that energy is released into motion. But in order to do this, you also have to have not just compliance, but on the side of potential energy, but also inertiance on the side of kinetic energy. That specifically, you have to have something which is capable of responding to the momentum of it. So you properly speaking have uh, a sense in which you can describe um, the elastic motion of systems, where you have both a determination of compliance and inertiance, or potential and kinetic. And from that standpoint, you have uh, not only just bodies which are related to each other, just like externally, in the sense of colliding with one another or interacting with each other, in the sense of where you now have something which is more describable with uh, classical equations of motion, as like rigid body mechanics, for instance. Um, but specifically with specifically where you get to gravity, you have a sense in which motion is not something that is determined from the outside, but is actually the natural path of motion that the object um, ought to follow. Like uh, free fall is actually the natural state of motion all uh, for all things. Like uh, the abnormality is rather, in a sense, not that the apple falls, but rather that the earth is in the way of the apple's fall. So uh, instead of looking at the impact of a thing, or ask what was the actual force that um, caused the uh, object to actually be moved away from its natural world line, which you know free fall being synonymous with weightlessness. There is the absence of any force to try to move the object away from its track in space time. So aborting a freely falling elevator to experience weightlessness, or say accelerate with a rocket ship, or say something of that nature. Um, but with the determination of uh, gravity, uh, from this uh, primary notion of preliminary notion of elasticity, because elasticity is something of both space and matter, is something which is essential to understanding gravity in its concept. That not even just essentially understanding both the elasticity of space and how um, matter or mass responds uh, uh, to said curvature, where specifically there is like the specific equations, like if you look at the energy momentum or stress energy tensor, that is essentially describing that elasticity relation, or could also be thought of in a sense as a generalization of a Hooke's law, or is Hooke's law in a tensorial form, which in particular is something which appears both in continuum mechanics, but also in gravity as well. So let me think. Is there anything else specific I could mention about that? But the transition actually from mechanics to physics, or properly speaking, from gravitation to electrodynamics, is particularly have to do with the idea that of light or as something which is transcendental to gravitation and relativity, as that which is irreducible, specifically as to any sort of mechanical or simply mechanical phenomenon. Or you could also, or alternatively, you can describe it as you could also say the transition from classical to quantum, in to also put it in different words. Okay, so that conceptually was that first part. Now I could stop for questions. That was too much or a lot, or I could uh, or I can move on.
What do people want? Do people want questions? Do people want to move on? If people have questions, just raise their hand.
Rubio wants to come up again. Come on up.
Hello. Is there any incentive to mine time and supercrystals?
Sorry, could you repeat that again?
Yeah, is there any incentive to mine time crystals and supercrystals? And what do they mean?
I see. Um, so, uh, specifically, uh, a time crystal in solid state physics is basically it's a little bit of a misnomer because it really just means that for some particular quantum mechanical system, it's the lowest energy state that the particles exhibit a um, repetitive uh, motion. So the idea, or one of the reasons why there is research into time crystals is that it serves as a basis for um, actually having a basis for memory or computer memory in quantum computers. Uh, so in order to like prepare a time crystal is that specifically if you have some quantum system like a group of typically it's like a ring of ions or something like this, and they're brought down to a very low temperature and until they're in a very until they reach their lowest state that um, normally we would think that the ring of ions would be stationary or would be cooled down because if you cool something down you're not gonna you would expect that there would be less vibrational motion, but if you've the issue is that this um if time symmetry were violated, then the ring it would be possible then for the ring to vary periodically in time. Um, but this is one of the things that is one major difference between quantum mechanical description and uh, classical mechanics. That there is a kind of special behavior that arises in this instance. That with the issue with there being with quantum systems are not so easily determinable by time dependent variables. So uh, it would then mean that uh, it would then mean that cooling it to um, that under some circumstances it can uh, that that it would interact with it itself and cause it to become localized. Uh, so in that sense, and I mean there are there's been some presentation about this in different uh, like science-based or physics-based magazines or journals that talk about this. Um, but really the main point of application is in quantum computing and quantum information,
Mhm.
as where time crystals would be something that is actually um, uh, would specifically be uh, useful for having a memory system for a quantum computer. But
Mhm.
That's kind of what it is and what the application is in a nutshell.
Um, Another question. It's a little bit of
Yeah.
a tangent, but does the study of black holes lead to better detection of enemy stealth bombers?
Sorry, what's that?
Does the study of black holes also contribute to detecting stealth bombers? Well, maybe that's not a physics question. More like astrophysics.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm honestly not sure how I would answer.
Okay, here's another one. So, are we quantum entangled through time and space? Like, if I were to watch a YouTube video, for instance, and then they say something when I was thinking something at the same time too, like that could be a sign of entanglement, right? Or is that just some voodoo talk? Voodoo talk. Forget it. I'm getting off stage. Bye. Thank you.
All right. And we have a question from one of our mods, mathematician. If you can come on up.
Hello. So my question to you is, what is your opinion and or criticisms of the tired light hypothesis? If you have any.
Hmm. Yeah, so as far as I know, with tired light, there it was originally speculation that the idea that uh, there is uh, that the idea is that as an alternative to um, or say alternative prediction to the Big Bang and other cosmology such as steady state is there the Big Bang and steady state, both which rely on a general relativistic notion of expansion, but the uh, the idea, I think, or at least, I mean, I'm not like in astrophysics isn't my area of expertise, but I do think that at least some of what I know about the tired light um, doesn't quite fully account for uh, redshift uh, because it depends on the um, like if you have like a static universe where supposing that there is a mechanism for tired light, the you would kind of expect the surface brightness of the stars and galaxies you observe to not vary to not vary much and to be constant, and that you know the farther away something is, you don't receive as much light, um, and the area should diminish as well. So the idea is that uh, the apparent uh, the distribution of light should be appear to be more uniform. So if you have something like a distant astronomical object receding in space, then the photons are being emitted at a much more reduced rate, because there is each photon is traveling a distance that's or there's a greater distance that the photon has to travel as it's being or as the object is receding. But uh, with the notion of expansion, you have the object appearing to be larger than it actually uh, uh, appears to be, because it was originally closer before the photons had initially decided to travel. So uh, at least as far as I know, that there have been certain tests that would uh, rule out that um, hypothesis, but also uh, again, I would also say that uh, I would also need to investigate this matter myself.
I put an article in the side chat, which is was published in August by one author from Kansas State University. I think you might be interested in it. It's related, but since this may not be your area of expertise, can I ask you a question about quantum physics? Is that your area of expertise?
Sorry, repeat that last part.
What's your area of expertise?
Oh, yeah, I specifically said solid state, but I have
Oh,
like
okay.
um general knowledge of physics.
Okay, so I guess my next question then would be, what's your opinion and or criticisms of pilot wave theory?
Um, so uh, definitely, I would actually say that uh, it- uh, I do think that pilot wave theory, or generally Bohmian mechanics, um, does uh, address a lot of the conceptual um, issues which surround quantum mechanics, and not purely just to say that uh, i- uh, in the sense of a non-local uh, hidden variables theories, because uh, with there has been a because in the Bohmian theory that there is there are both entities of a specifically a quantum particle and a guiding wave. So the kind of issue between wave particle duality is there's not sort of this um, uh, sort of strict sort of division between both of those notions, but you have more of a conceptual account of how it's uh, described. So, like for instance, in the double slit experiment, you particle will either go through one of or two of the slits, not as a simply a something which is unknowable, but is actually determined by the pilot wave. So, and this is kind of at least in the distinction between that there is a non-local quantum potential that is or at least defined as a implicate order, and versus the explicate order, or the manifest sort of field. So I guess in the general sense, I would say that out of all of the interpretations, I do think that Bohmian mechanics does resolve a lot of these issues, in my opinion.
What's the I'm not familiar with Bohmian mechanics, but what's the difference between Bohmian mechanics and pilot wave?
Well, generally, they're pretty much like well, the idea is that the original hidden variable formulation was first presented by de Broglie, but as the idea that where there's atomic orbitals where they're stationary waves, he had attempted to describe these waves with a relativistic wave equation that he had de Broglie had originally was the one who developed the first equations for the pilot wave theory, but it was Bohm who had about 30-ish years after had rediscovered de Broglie's original theory, and had improved upon it. So it is part of the same like continuity. I mean, sometimes they're used synonymously, but I say Bohmian mechanics to specifically refer to Bohm's contribution.
Okay, I appreciate you answering my questions. I'll look into this more. Thanks.
Alrighty. Do you want to continue with your lecture at this time?
Yeah, I'm starting to get kind of worn out here.
I don't
But
blame you.
yeah. But I'm happy that I did get a chance to share some of this, and to answer some of people's questions.
Alrighty. Are we wrapping up now then?
Yeah, I would say so. We're getting close to I mean, usually it's like about 3 hours.
Typically 3 hours, but when people request more, we can go for more. But Since we're finishing up, thank you, Avalonia, for taking time out of your day to talk to us, and thank you to the audience and all who came up on stage. Remember to check out Avalonia's YouTube channel and website, both pinned in the Avalonia Socials channel. That being said, we're wrapping up questions and heading out. Have a good one, folks.